Hi, folks. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Tim Loudon. I'm the program manager for the Digital Analytics program, and you are tuning into another of our DAP Learning Series webinars. Today, we're very excited to be talking specifically about measuring your mobile users, and I'm doubly excited because the webinar will be led today by my colleague, the inimitable Freddie Blicker, and we'll be passing it over to him in just a bit. Before we get started, I do want to note that we will be I think Freddie has a section where he's going to be asking you all as the audience to submit some ideas. You can do that in the chat box, which is on the panel, which should be on the right-hand side of your screen. But in addition to that, if you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to put them in the chat box, and we'll address them at the end of the webinar. Also, after this is all done, you'll get a follow-up email which will contain the slides and potential other resources that we might mention during the webinar today. And it will have a satisfaction survey that we ask that you please fill out. We do take into account all of the things that you say, and we read them all. So it would be much appreciated if you fill it out. Before I pass it over to Freddie, we are joined today by a special guest, being that this is a webinar specifically on mobile. We're joined in the room today by the Federal Mobile Gov Community of Practice lead, Jacob Parcell, and he's got a couple things that he wants to mention about mobile and potentially his community before we get going. So Jacob, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Tim. I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm really glad we got to partner on this webinar. I think it's really cool that we're going to be able to show folks how to really start thinking about their mobile users today. If we could put it on the third slide, I just have a couple slides and I'm going to turn it back over to Freddie for the main event. You know, the state of mobile friendliness in the government right now, I would say is good. When I started this position 6 years ago, you know, we were telling people not to build native apps for the most part, but I think agencies now know they need to be mobile friendly. They're developing a lot more responsive web than native apps. They're incorporating their mobile strategy into their larger digital strategy, which is great because I don't think mobile is separate from your digital strategy. You always have to be thinking about the mission. In the websites, we're starting to see a lot of people in the private sector and a lot of people starting in government to think mobile first when they redesign their website. So instead of thinking of the desktop version, they'll actually start their design thinking about the mobile version on the small phone and then break out from there to the bigger screen sizes that they might want to provide on it. Generally, with responsive, you only have 3 screen sizes, as most of you know. But I think for us to do that better and to really get better at how we serve mobile customers, and I know Freddie's going to talk a little bit about the impact of mobile here, so I don't want to steal his thunder. We need to we need better data on our mobile users, and I think that digital analytics program and what you guys do here have some ways that we can really start to hone down on what your mobile users are doing and not have theories about your mobile users, but actually have real data on what your users are doing. So when you start to think about those mobile first experiences as you might redesign or might think to improve it, how do you approach that? You know, I think it's important to think about mobile and analytics because the Internet of Things, augmented reality, chatbots, all those fun words you hear about will be driven by your analytics. So that's why I'm very happy that we're here today. And now, you know, Tim has been very gracious enough to let me plug. So Freddie, if you can take it to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing government-wide to collaborate around mobile. As Tim said, I've been leading the mobile gov community of practice since 2011. We've discussed strategies for mobile audiences. You know, we've really talked about native app versus mobile web. I think the use case for most agencies is mobile web, but we're also starting to look at APIs and ways of opening our data so they can be used for various types of presentation layers. We've published articles on DigitalGov.gov, which I think hopefully we'll be able to turn this webinar into an article to share government-wide. We've helped agencies test websites on multiple devices. We have the Federal Crowdsourced Mobile Testing Program, which we use to have agencies help agencies test mobile websites. So if you have a new mobile website you've released, we'd help you come up with a script. Then we'd help you recruit volunteers with different devices, sizes, and operating systems to help you test that out and get some feedback on it. And you can join us on the DigitalGov Communities page, which is at digitalgov/communities/mobile. We'll send that out on the chat portion of the webinar. And we also collaborate a lot with cross-government programs with mobile tools like DAP. So I'm going to turn it over to Freddie. I think this is going to be a great webinar if you're thinking about your mobile audience. I think you're going to get down into the weeds a good bit, and I think that's where we need to start thinking about when we go to designing for mobile first and mobile audiences. So Freddie, Tim, thank you so much, and Freddie, take it away.
Great, thanks, Jacob. So I'm going to go back to the beginning of the slide and just introduce myself. So I recently joined the DAP team. I've been doing analytics for about 10 years, primarily on e-commerce sites using all the major analytics vendors. So I specialize in technical implementation and reporting. I have to say the most fun I've had in my career is doing mobile analytics for Macy's.com out in San Francisco and working on the DAP program with Tim. So I am really excited to talk about mobile analytics with you today. So here's our agenda for the webinar. I won't read this back to you verbatim, so I'll just summarize all this with a couple things we're hoping to help you out with today. So really the first is we want to explain the mobile landscape and how this impacts your agency and your website. The second thing is we want to provide you with context and with market trend data about the growth of mobile and provide you with data to bring back to your team to help you make the case for improving your mobile site experience. The third thing is we want to teach you how to use DAP to actually pull data and understand your mobile performance on a regular basis. So we're going to go into the why, the what, and the how of mobile analytics. A couple quick points. There are no stupid questions, so please do submit any questions that you have. As Tim mentioned later on in the presentation, we're going to be doing some live brainstorming for you on how we actually think about pulling reports, putting them together. So please submit those ahead of time so that we can start queuing those up. You know, we'll probably make some mistakes, but that's how web analysts work, and it'll be an interesting look into how analysts think about data and how we actually use Google Analytics. So why are we talking about mobile reporting today? Well, I want to start out with driving home that we are well past the mobile tipping point. On this slide, you can see that mobile users globally outpaced desktop usage for the first time in 2015, and it's only been increasing since then. So mobile usage is going to continue growing. This impacts every agency's website, and so we really need to start thinking of designing for mobile first, to Jacob's point. So I've got a couple of slides on market trends data to really drive home this point about how people are accessing websites today and how this has fundamentally changed, both from our users' expectations and how people are actually engaging with websites. And so let's jump into some of those trends. So there is actually a forecast for 2017 where 75% of all internet traffic is going to come from mobile devices, with smartphone being the primary growth driver. 87% of people always have their smartphone at their side, both day and night. On average, people are checking their phones 150 times per day, and they spend around 3 hours using them. 48% of U.S. households are actually mobile only, which is a pretty interesting statistic. 48% of users are starting any type of research on a mobile device by using a search engine. And the volume of mobile Google searches have now eclipsed desktop searches. So in summary, you really need to keep up with the pace of this change so that our users accessing different government websites can find the information, the services that they're looking for, and this primarily has to be on your smartphone. So let's talk about some additional market trends here. Google has done studies showing how mobile site speed impacts your mobile users, and Google actually found a correlation between the longer the page load time, the higher the bounce. So on this slide, you'll see Google's findings regarding the site speed. So the takeaway here is for your mobile site, if it takes a long time to load on your smartphone, the more likely your users will bounce and they're not going to come back. So let's jump into some high-level government data that we took from the DAP program, from our Google Analytics program. On this slide, it's specific mobile DAP data. So we are looking here at the device growth and share of traffic by both smartphones and tablets since the inception of DAP in 2013. So you can clearly see how mobile has grown exponentially to the point where in December 2016, total mobile now represented 43% of all government website traffic, with smartphone being the primary growth driver. You can kind of see that tablet is kind of ebbing and flowing, and it's kind of tapering off towards the end of the year. Smartphone device traffic on all government websites using DAP now accounts for 36% of all traffic. So one thing to note, we're already 3 months into the new year, and the mobile share of traffic is now actually 44%. So we're only seeing this data increase, and so that has a lot of implications for your website design strategy. We're definitely fast approaching 50% within the next year or two. So if we dig a bit deeper into this, I've broken this data down into a view between desktop and total mobile devices. So total mobile here represents both smartphone and tablet devices, and I'm comparing 2016 data versus 2015. What's interesting here is that we see the shift away from desktop users in the black bar to mobile users. So in 2016, government websites actually experienced a 7 percentage point shift away from desktop towards mobile devices. Now, if we drill down further into this data and break this out by desktop, smartphone, and tablet, so a 3-screen view, we're also looking at 2016 versus 2015, which is what's interesting here is that we see tablet is actually losing traffic share and is actually shifting towards smartphones. So again, this really drives home the point. Smartphone is the growth driver, and the takeaway here is that we really need to be thinking about mobile first. One thing I do want to plug here is analytics.usa.gov. Here we aggregate all of DAP data into an easy-to-use dashboard for end users to get a 30,000-foot view of mobile data, OSs, device type, etc. You can pivot between different websites and really look at those trends. If you want to look at more detailed data, Google Analytics would be where you could go, but to kind of keep your finger on the pulse of your mobile program, you could go to analytics.usa.gov. So why do we need to measure our mobile traffic? Well, number one, obviously with all that data I just presented, it's undeniable that mobile continues to grow. So 44% of traffic is now on mobile as of February 2017. That means mobile UX is more important than ever. Since people are accessing websites on phones, you want that user experience on devices to prevent bounces and user frustration. And as we've seen, if there's too much friction to accessing a site on a mobile device, users will leave your site. The second reason why we want to measure your mobile traffic is mobile site speed impacts whether your visitors stay or they go. So if your mobile site takes too long to load, like in the Google study, people will leave. 53% of mobile site visitors will leave a page that takes longer than 3 seconds to load on a mobile device. 61% of those users won't even bother to come back. So site speed is really critical to measure, and we're going to be showing you later on in this presentation how to actually use DAP to look at that data. The third reason why you really want to measure your mobile traffic is when you consider your visibility and your findability of your site and search engine results on Google or Bing. So organic search is one of the largest traffic drivers for your website. Google now has a mobile-specific index where it looks at your mobile website performance, how it's optimized, how it's technically built. If they see that your site is too slow and it's not optimized, you're probably not going to rank very high in their search results. Typically, many websites or mobile websites today are bloated. They have too much code. This decreases speed, so you can certainly use DAP to help understand those types of issues. So really the risk here is, if your mobile website is not fast, if it doesn't load, if it has bloated code, you could lose your audience from search results. And so we're going to be helping you understand how to use DAP to deeper into these types of questions. So how do we better understand our mobile site performance? Well, you're going to use DAP. DAP stands for the Digital Analytics Program, and you can use it to answer your mobile questions. So DAP helps you understand a report on different friction points, UX navigation issues, bounce rates, etc. You can look at mobile site speed. You can look at your mobile organic search. You can look at different traffic sources. There are many, many ways that you can slice and dice the data to understand and look into specific questions that you might have to help drive improvement in your site. So out of the box, mobile analytics within DAP is just the same as the out of the box reports in Google Analytics. So I'm sure all of you have logged into Google Analytics. You know kind of the basic out of the box reports. You can basically segment any of those reports by mobile device type. So you can see what page URLs somebody browsed on a smartphone, or what referring domains sent traffic on tablet devices to your website. You can slice and dice this data in any different fashion that you'd pleased. You have also mobile-specific reporting, so it helps you look at device type, category, device model, screen resolution, device orientation, so switching between portrait or landscape mode. There's a lot of different combinations of this data that you can look at. One thing to note is DAP does not currently support mobile app tracking, but we're not ruling it out for the future. You can potentially set up your own instance of Google Analytics for any type of mobile analytics tracking for apps, but we'll have some guidance in the future on whether or not DAP is able to support something like that. So before we actually dive into using the tool, I wanted to speak a little bit about how to actually think about mobile reporting. So you'll recall all the data I put together. I basically took a high-level 30,000-foot view of total mobile traffic, and then I broke it down into a 3-screen view, so desktop, smartphone, and tablet. So really the industry standard of thinking about mobile analytics is looking at this by device category. So mobile, typically total mobile is smartphones plus tablets, but the way that I recommend you look at it is looking at desktop, smartphone, and tablet. You definitely get more insight by reporting using this 3-screen view, and I definitely recommend looking at your traffic that way because as we saw, tablet usage is definitely on the decline, whereas smartphone is picking up that traffic from tablet. So before you start actually going into Google Analytics and trying to pull data, I really recommend you write down the question you're trying to answer. You want to be as specific as possible, and you want to avoid paralysis by analysis. You do not want to pull a buffet of metrics, so you need to be very specific. One challenge that many people have with analytics tool is going in and pulling any metric and every metric and not knowing what it means or how it should be used within the context of a specific question. So on this slide, you'll see a couple of different examples of questions that you could use to start that conversation with your team on how your site is doing within mobile. So I am now going to jump into a brief demo using Google Analytics and looking at different traffic reports. Today's volunteer was the National Science Foundation, so a big thank you to Terry. So I have put together some basic overviews of reporting, and I'm just going to go through those with you now. So before we start out doing any type of polling reporting, I want to talk about segments. So within segments, Google Analytics out of the box comes with a mobile and a tablet segment already pre-populated for you. You can go in and create a desktop segment, and I've included that logic here. This is just an example of how you would create a segment. You can certainly go in and do that yourself. Now I'm going to go into Google Analytics and show you where to actually access these segments. Okay, so in this first view, we have a report looking at devices. So this is kind of the out-of-the-box report I mentioned earlier. You would simply come into your profile, you would browse under Audience, and you would go to the mobile section of your site. Now here you can see a quick overview, and you'll see here out of the box Google Analytics breaks out by desktop, mobile, and tablet automatically for you. That's only useful to a certain degree. So you really need to understand, and you want to understand what type of content you're actually looking for. What is the content performance? What are visitors doing? So this 30,000-foot view of desktop, mobile, and tablet isn't necessarily the most actionable or useful view. So that's what custom reports are for. That's what kind of diving later on in this presentation we'll look at specifically. Underneath the mobile section of this report, you also have a devices section where this breaks down the mobile device info. And so you can actually see different device models, whether it's Apple's iPhone or the iPad or a Samsung Galaxy S7, you can see the different device models out of the box that are accessing your site. I do want to point out with segments in general, DAP properties have lots of data, as you know. Sometimes we hit some issues where there are other website pages showing up when you use segments in out-of-the-box reporting. And you would solve this by using custom reports. We'll get into that more a little bit later. But I did want to call out sometimes within the out-of-the-box reports, you will see some other sites or sections of whatever site you're looking at bleed into the report. And And that's okay. Data is directional. This is not accounting. The trends within the data are actually the most important piece of this puzzle. So data is never going to be perfect. So let me go into a demo of how to actually apply a segment, a mobile segment. So Google has a really useful content section with 4 main types of reports. And let me go there for you real quick. So the 4 types of reports that Google Analytics has are all pages, content drill down, landing pages, and exit pages. So you can apply mobile segments to each of these reports to glean insights to help you make decisions about your site performance by mobile device type. So let's do an example of how you would actually apply a mobile device segment here. So you can see here I'm in the NSF, so the National Science Foundation profile, and I am going to look at an all pages report. And then I'm going to apply segments. Now I've already applied segments here. So you can see I've applied desktop, tablet, and mobile. To apply segments, you would simply come up here, hit this little plus button, and you would search for whatever segment, whatever device type segment you're looking for. So you would click on mobile traffic, and then you would click apply. And then now you can see your trend line for your content on various device types. So it breaks it out very nicely and very easily by desktop, mobile, and tablet traffic. So for NSF, we see a large portion of their traffic is going to desktop, obviously. A smaller portion is actually on smartphone. There's actually more, 5% of all the traffic is on tablet. This was for the previous week. So this is a really good way of being able to identify your content and the performance of your content on different device types. Now you can drill further down into a URL within Google Analytics and get additional metrics. Okay, so I'm going to do another example. Let's say you want to understand your site speed on smartphone devices. So I am going to go to site speed, and then click on overview. And then you can apply segments here, your mobile segments, and understand using these segments your mobile performance. So you can look here and you can actually see average page load time of your website on the 3-screen view on desktop, tablet, and mobile traffic. This can also break down the different types of browsers, country, pages, etc. So this is a really good way to keep your finger on the pulse of the actual performance from a speed perspective of your site. So another example is, let's say you want to know where people are leaving your site on smartphone devices. So I am going to go and look at exits here. So I'm going to go to, it's under behavior, site content, and then exit pages. Now I've already applied the 3-screen view segments here. And now this gives me an idea on the National Science Foundation's website of number of exits, number of page views, the percentage of exits by device type, by URL. So this is a really good way of starting to think about how to analyze the psychology of your users and their behavior, and where they're engaging, where there are potentially friction points, and potentially, what's causing them to leave the site. So these are all examples that I recommend folks on this call start to think about, start to play around with in Google Analytics. And the primary way that you're going to do that is actually using mobile segments, so desktop, smartphone, and tablet. So moving on, let's go to how to actually apply segments in custom reports. So sometimes when the out-of-the-box reports in Google Analytics don't get you the data that you need, or let's say you have a high cardinality where you can't get all the data in a certain view, you can go into custom reports and actually put together a report using the same data and dimensions and also using the mobile segments. So this is a much more flexible way of thinking about data and being able to pull it out in a way that's useful to you. What I recommend folks on the call do is, a lot of this is trial and error. A lot of it is finding out what works for you, what gets you the data that you need to answer the question that you're trying to answer. So in this example, I have, for the National Science Foundation, an Explorer example. So Explorer type reports allow dimension drill downs. So this is typically the type of report that you'll see in the out-of-the-box reports built into Google Analytics. But here is an example of a report I put together looking at the same type of view. So let me get over to that report. So you'll see here in custom reports, and again, you just click on customization, and then you can click and create a new report. This is a report that I previously set up for the National Science Foundation as an example. You can come in here, you can choose your metrics, whatever metrics you're interested in looking at. So here I've got sessions, bounce rate, average page load time, and then you can define your dimension drill downs. You can look at landing page, traffic type, etc. And then you would filter by host name, and then whatever section of the website that you're responsible for, you would put that URL here, and then that would filter it to that specific URL. And so the end result would be this data. Now, let me remove these segments here and just show you how the data changes. So here we've got all users. This is everything. This is people on desktop, mobile, tablet, etc. If you wanted to only look at smartphone traffic, you could go into segments, search for mobile traffic, you could check that off, and then you could remove all users, and then you hit apply. And now you get precisely the data, the URL for only smartphones. So this is really powerful and flexible in letting you get the exact data that you're looking for. And this is what I recommend folks in the call actually use to answer specific questions. I find the custom reports to be a more powerful tool for when you get more advanced in slicing and dicing data. Now you could very easily just toggle this segment off and very easily add in your tablet segment, and then hit apply. And you'll see here I've left all users and my tablet traffic, so you can actually do a comparison here. So you can compare different segments and break them out by URL. So really powerful tool. I definitely recommend everyone on the call practice with those. The next example that I'm going to do is a flat report. It's a flat table report. This is very similar to the Explorer report I put together, except this, rather than have a kind of a drill down view of data, it just basically gives you, just like what its name is, a flat table of data. It's a really nice, simple way of getting the data and getting out of the tool. So basically you would go into custom reports, you would choose flat table. Here I'm choosing landing page, breaking out by sessions, average page load time, bounce rate. Let's say you wanted to understand what traffic sources were actually sending people to your website. This would be a good way to do that. Again, I'm filtering on hostname, nsf.gov, and then let's take a look at what the data looks like. So now that we see landing page, you can now filter or segment this by device type. So again, you can choose mobile traffic, and start to really understand landing pages. You could, if you want to get really fancy, you could also start mixing in device type plus referring source or channel. So you could look at mobile traffic from organic search or mobile traffic from email. There's a lot of different ways that you can slice and dice this and pivot and look at data. It's a very creative way of kind of filtering through all of this reporting and data to get at the insights and glean the insights that you need to do your job in order to improve your website for mobile. So let's move on to a couple of questions from folks on the call. And Tim and I are going to go into actually thinking about these, brainstorming, and thinking about how do we actually create these in custom reports or in the out-of-the-box reports, and try and get you some answers. So do we have any questions from everyone?
We do. Okay, so one of the things that has come in is that someone is saying that they're trying to replicate what you've been doing in their GA account, but they don't see desktop traffic as an option in segmentation. So this person specifically asked, is this something only super users can access? But it's not something only super users can access. Can you maybe walk through how you could create a custom segment for desktop?
Sure. definitely. So desktop out of the box does not come with Google Analytics. So let me walk you through how you would actually create that. So let me get out of here real quick. So within any report, so right now I am in the out of the box reports. I'm not in custom reports. With any report, you can go to the top of the page and sorry, there we go. You can click this add a segment. So you click add the segment, and then you can create a custom segment here. So you would click on new segment. You could call it device type example. And then you would want to define the actual device type. So here I'm going under advanced conditions, device category, exactly matches, and it pre-populates for you desktop. And so here you can see the summary. The logic of the segment works. It found 83% of users are on desktop for this specific view. So you know that that worked. And then you can hit save, and then that will be available on your specific reporting suite. So for everyone who is on this call, to be able to use a desktop segment, you'd have to create that by hand, but the mobile and the tablet segments are already there out of the box. So that's how you create a desktop segment.
I think actually we can segue into another one of the questions. One of the other questions was, will you have a guide to show us how to set up the reports? And I think what's interesting is one of the things we could do, I believe you can do this. I know you can send it for custom reports, you can send templates, but I think you can also send segment templates. So it's possible that in the follow-up email, we can include a link for anyone who's a DAP user on the call to be able to click on the segment that Freddie just showed you how to set up, and you should be able to apply it to your account. As far as some of the reports that you've shown, can we send those folks some
Sure.
templates as well?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'll share those templates out, and then you can just basically copy those and apply them to your DAP account.
Great. Another question that has come in here is, have you started to use AMP, and which government sites are using AMP? So AMP is an interesting conversation that's being talked about a lot now. For those of you that are unfamiliar, AMP is a product that Google's offered to increase the performance of mobile sites. And Jacob is looking like he wants to maybe toss a word in here.
Yeah, I'm still here. No, that's a great question. We've talked about that a little bit with the community of practice. David Fern, who runs our crowdsourced testing, did some exploration. I know there are a couple articles on DigitalGov about AMP. I've also heard some other things about AMP from other people with an outside perspective to government about that. And I'm actually going to be sharing some of that on the mobile community of practice listserv in the coming weeks. So definitely mixed reviews. Nobody in the federal government I know of has used or implemented AMP on a website. I know a couple organizations were talking about doing it, but they were wondering about terms of service and some of those policy issues. But there are also technical reasons for and against doing AMP, which I can't get into right now, but it is a question that the community's been talking about. And I'm not sure what your take is on it, guys.
Thanks, Jacob. We have one more question that we can address now before I want to throw it back over and make sure that we can show things like performance and things like that. So this is an interesting question. Can you confirm that Google Analytics reports iPad traffic as mobile, not tablet? This seems to be the case on our website. Have you heard of that, Freddie?
I have not, no. No, typically the tablet device category will track all types of iPads, whether it's 7-inch, 9-inch, etc. It's all based on the user agent string. So Google Analytics is looking at the user agent string, and within that user agent string, from whatever device you're using, it will include literally a word that says iPad. So it should not be showing up under mobile phone. If it is, I'd love to see a screenshot of that so that we can dig into that more deeper.
Great. I think we've covered all the questions so far. We are already coming up close to time, so I want to make sure you can show us page speed and things like that.
Yep, sure. So really quickly, I think I mentioned page speed previously in this deck, but let me go back to that real quick. So obviously site speed is one area where you can monitor your performance by mobile device. I've got an example here looking at the National Science Foundation where we look at average page load time in terms of site speed. What's interesting here is we're looking at mobile specific traffic, so mobile device, smartphone traffic, so not tablet. And what's interesting here is that the mobile enabled version of NSF actually has an average page load time of 8 seconds. Which is pretty high. If you remember the Google correlation of page load time to increases in bounces or probability in bounces from your site, this would, from a mobile perspective, seem to indicate or correlate with perhaps a higher exit rate from the National Science Foundation site because perhaps the mobile website does not load as fast as it could. So this would be an interesting way to look at all of your sites to think about your site speed overview and better understanding how your sites are performing by mobile device type. Now, I want to point out here, again, this is the same concept with using these mobile device segments. Again, I only have mobile traffic here, but it's just as easy to go in and add tablet. So let me do that right now. Now, interesting here, on tablet, the site is much faster. So it's only 2 seconds average page load time here under site speed. And just to make sure everyone knows where I am, I'm under behavior, site speed, and overview. And I am slicing and dicing this report just basically using the exact same segments that we spoke about at the beginning of this presentation. So this is a really useful way of slicing and dicing your data to keep your finger on the pulse for how your site is performing across all 3 device types. So let me go back to the deck. I wanted to speak a little bit about how to actually measure the effectiveness of your website on mobile. So you recall in the beginning, I had a couple of different charts looking at our analysis of mobile engagement and growth of mobile traffic. You could very easily do something like that yourself. And so I have put together a Google spreadsheet that I am going to share after this presentation with everyone on the phone, where you can basically plug and play your numbers from Google Analytics and understand the percentage change, understand the growth rate. So typically we, within the mobile space, we refer to penetration rate. So that just means the percentage share by mobile device type. So you can better understand the shifts this year versus last year from one device type to another. So I'll be sending that out. This is the link to it right now, but I'll send you the actual link after this presentation so that you can use this spreadsheet in your analysis to help you put together charts and different pieces and cuts of data to present to your team. One thing I did want to speak about is monitoring your mobile site health. So obviously, we just went through the site speed by device category using the mobile segments. That's a really important piece to monitor for your mobile strategy. It impacts everything from organic search to people deciding whether they are going to stay or go when they're browsing your site on a smartphone. Another good and interesting way to look at the mobile side of your health is looking at Google Search Console for your mobile site. So within Google Search Console, you can actually go in and understand what types of errors you're seeing by mobile device. So you can look at it by smartphone, by tablet, by desktop. You can actually see what your visibility is by device type as well. So basically, that is your entry point into the mind of Google to better understand how your site is performing within their search results and what potential technical changes you need to be looking out for when Google actually crawls your site. Another thing that you can do there, you can actually monitor bounce rates. You can monitor the visitor journey through Search Console, but most importantly, Google Analytics. Definitely you want to slice and dice your data by device type there. Any questions on that? That is a lengthy conversation on actually looking at visitor journey. We can certainly help advise on some of those questions. So if you contact us through our support email address, which we'll have at the end of the slides, we'll be more than happy to help and brainstorm on those types of questions. A really good tool for testing your site speed is a developer tool by Google. You literally pop in the URL of your mobile website and it tests and looks at the actual page speed of your site. One thing I did want to point out is I know most people here are already familiar with DAP, but for anyone who is not, please, if you want to join the DAP program and implement DAP Google Analytics, email us a request at dap@support.digitalgov.gov. We'll open a ticket, grant you access to the platform, help you get the tool set up, and we're always there to help you with any questions that you may have about reporting, about analysis. I realize a lot of the reporting that we went over today, a lot of the examples can be a bit overwhelming for some folks just getting into this. That is the world of data, and we enjoy that. So we're more than happy to help you out with any challenges that you run into. And with that, if anyone has any questions, we're happy to take those now. And if you have any ideas on reports or questions on reports, we're happy to go through and do a live demo of those as well.
Great. Thank you, Freddie. So for folks that maybe have questions about how to track something specifically, please send those in now. We might be able to demo one or two. But as those are happening, or if anyone has other questions, feel free to put them in now. I have a question for you, for Freddie.
Great.
So Freddie, what do you think in the situation that let's say I work for an organization that is thinking about doing a redesign of their site, which I can say I can guarantee some of you on the call right now are planning out a redesign of your site because it's something that happens in a cyclical nature. We're seeing lots of agencies do it. What are the most important things for me to track prior to the launch of our redesign and after the launch of our redesign with mobile users in mind?
That is a great question. So what I would say is it really is going to depend on your agency's website's mission. So the big question that I would ask anyone who comes to us through the DAP support line is, what is your objective? What are you trying to accomplish? To what end does your website exist? Is it filling out a form? Is it getting somebody to download a specific PDF? Is it increasing engagement by X% versus last year? It has to be very specific. And so basically that's what I would ask anyone who came to us for, is how do you define success? So let's say out of the box, just off the top of my head, let's say it's the State Department and they want to understand pre and post redesign of a form. Let's say the form is 5 steps. So there's 5 different pages that somebody has to go through to actually submit it, and they want to get the form down to 3 pages. I could potentially see looking at number of sessions starting at the first page of the form, and at what point do those sessions actually leave or bounce. I could look at number of form submissions. So I'd want to look at high-level sessions, form submissions, potentially bounce rate, and I'd want to slice and dice that by the 3-screen view, so desktop, smartphone, and tablet. You could take that data using the spreadsheet template that I put together and compare, a month before the actual relaunch of the redesign and a month after the actual redesign goes live. And then you could look at the percentage change between those metrics, so between sessions or between number of form submissions. And you could actually look at, okay, was there a percentage decrease or an increase in these specific metrics? And what does that look like? So let's say you had less form submissions on the State Department's website after the redesign. That could indicate and correlate that the redesign, there's something wrong with it, or perhaps it's confusing, or perhaps you actually need 4 pages and not 3 pages. So it could be any number of things, but I would want to objectively look at the data from doing that pre and post analysis using that spreadsheet I put together, and really try to glean insights from comparing those data sets.
Awesome. Yeah, just to add to that, I think that there are definitely some things that you can look at really, really quickly with specific intent on the success factors, and also things like, I think one of the things that we see most drastically happen when someone does a redesign is that if previously their homepage wasn't mobile friendly and on a mobile device the content was really tiny, they tend to see a really high bounce rate from mobile devices. And then if you're thinking about making something mobile responsive or coming at it from a mobile first mentality, after the launch of a redesign, you typically would want to see a drastic decrease in the amount of bounces from the homepage if it's being accessed on mobile devices. Another thing that's really interesting and that I was noticing as you were going through on the NSF examples is that, content that's viewed from mobile devices often doesn't line up with content that's most viewed on a desktop. And so that's one of those reports, the landing pages report that you showed, the general pages report that shows just all, the most viewed pages. You can actually, and maybe this would be a great thing to demo, you can actually switch up the order of your segments, and it will then put the first segment at the top. So if you start out, let's say you have two segments applied and you have a desktop segment and a mobile segment, it's always going to filter from most to least starting with desktop. But if you can swap those segments and put mobile on top, then it'll filter with the highest mobile visited pages first and filter that down. So you can see the variations in the content that people are viewing with their different devices. So right now, Freddie's got all users in tablet traffic. So Freddie, can you just switch the order of those segments on the top?
Sure.
So you'll see there's this, you can just grab them and drag and drop. And then as Freddie does this, now when he goes down, it's being filtered now by the top tablet traffic page, which in this case happens to be the same, but in a lot of cases is not. So that's something just to keep in mind.
Yep, no, that's a really good point. And my advice to people on the call is to just play around with it. Spend some time. This is not easy stuff. It takes some elbow grease to get in there and figure out what works for you, because the tool is so flexible and you can pivot off many different data points. You really need to figure out what answers your question and how to make the data work for you and how to get the tool to actually give you the view of the data that you're looking for.
Absolutely. I didn't actually, for a long time, this is like a total admission, and I work in Google Analytics every day. There was like a fairly long period of time that I didn't even know you could apply segments to reports, custom reports, I'm sorry. And when I found that out, it was a real epiphany, because now for folks that are on the call who are current DAP users and you have a bunch of custom reports already made, you already have the mobile and tablet traffic segments given to you by the system. And then once you create or implement the template for the desktop one, you've got the whole three-screen view, and you can take any of the custom reports you already have and put the three-screen view segments on it. So
yeah, that's a great point.
All right. I don't see any other questions, and we're almost out of time. So with that, I think we'll wrap up. I want to thank both Freddie for the great presentation and Jacob Parcells for jumping in and telling us about the MobileGov community and giving us a little bit of insight about AMP as well.